They say hindsight's 20/20, but most of the time when we're talking about hindsight and we're looking at things like financial independence and retiring early and things like that, we're talking to 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds that have lived their whole life. But as you go around YouTube, what you find is there's not a lot of people that are our age, in their 50s, that are talking about the things that they would have done differently. We're going to the older generation to understand from them what they would have done differently and hope that whatever they did still relates to us and our current generation. So I thought I would take the opportunity just to talk to you about 4 things that I learned through the course of my life, and when I look back, that I might have done a little bit differently had I had a chance to do it over again. But before I do that, for those of you that have been rocking with me for a while, welcome back to the channel. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'm Sabado. I've been retired for about 1.5 years, and I found financial independence at 51. I'm 53 now. I just had a birthday a couple weeks ago. And this channel is just a channel where I share my story in hopes that it'll inspire you to live your best life, because it's not my expectation that everybody's going to retire early, but it is my expectation that we all do the things that we can do within our goal or within our scope to live our best lives. And so I'm trying to set up where I can have you learn from my experience. So on that note, let's get into it. So the 4 things that, as I look back in my life, that I would do differently. Number 1, I had a bad habit of downplaying my accomplishments. As I look today, I've done a lot of cool stuff. I had the opportunity to hire people into an organization that really built the infrastructure of the internet. I had the opportunity to travel the country, the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico, and do motivational speaking and leadership development. I had the opportunity to help build, during COVID, some of the first COVID units and mass vaccination centers. I've had the opportunity to really help a lot of people do a lot of stuff. But I've always been more humble than I am braggadocious. And so the idea was, when people would talk about those accomplishments, what I would do is I would downplay them. Because where I came from, it wasn't about trying to show people what you're trying to do. It was about actually doing it. I have a personal mission statement to uplift the human condition in any way that I can. And whether or not you raise or uplift the human condition, it's not really about what I tell people. It's about what people experience. And so there may be people that I've uplifted that I never hear from, and there may be some that I do hear from, but it's not about the accolades, it's about the result. And so I've always, in the spirit of humility, downplayed those accomplishments. And I think I may have gotten a little more satisfaction had I just said thank you and appreciated and relished in those accomplishments, because we get caught into the trap of more and more and more. But the reality is at some point you have to sit back and smell the roses. And I just don't think I did that enough. And I think there were a lot of things in my life that suffer because of it. Number 2, in the same spirit of humility and not wanting to be better than other people, I really put people above me. I gave people deference that they didn't necessarily deserve. I've always believed that I'm not better than anybody, but nobody's better than me. But instead of looking at people for who they were in some cases, I would automatically give them an A+ and give them an opportunity to work themselves down. And what came with that on my end were some expectations, because I realized that not everybody is like me. I want to help people. I want to do the things that I can do to help uplift this human condition, help people feel better about themselves, help people do the things that are going to make them feel more fulfilled. But that's just not everybody's goal. And so I could treat people well, I could do all the things that I want to do, but if I expect other people to do the same thing off the bat, then it's going to create issues for me. And so I would put people in positions where I gave them deference that they didn't deserve, and it really created a scenario for me where I was disappointed. And in another video, I talk about lowering expectations and not having expectations of other people. But again, had I had a chance to go back and do it again, I might have eliminated a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, had the appropriate level of expectation for people, and really bridge some gaps where maybe I've burned some, or not put myself in situations where I became eventually frustrated because people were on a different frequency. Number three, deflecting from my natural gifts. I was fortunate enough, I think I've mentioned before that, I was adopted as a kid. And when I was a kid, I'd read about adoption, I'd read about the effects of adoption on kids. And what I would find and what I would read is that there were high rates of incarceration and bad health outcomes and abuse. And realistically, folks, I fought the odds because I was adopted into a family that I had a mother and a father, and my father was a military man. My mother went back to school and became a technical writer. They were very structured in how they raised me. They were very intentional with how they raised me. They raised me to be an individual. And folks, at the end of the day, I'm a 53-year-old retired black dude in America. So take that for what it's worth, but it's not as common as I would like to think it is. And so there were a lot of things that came with that. But along with that, a lot of times I'd find myself getting defensive when people talked about maybe how good I had it, or the fact that when I walk into a room, I have a presence that might impact the vibe of the room on a regular basis, or the fact that, I have the gift of gab. When I talk, people listen. I'm like the black E.F. Hutton, and the fact that I have the intelligence or whatever it is, those natural gifts are, but I would always downplay those because I never wanted to live my life thinking, I was something special. I'm just, as they say, I'm just a black man caught up in the mix trying to make it happen. But there's a lot of people that don't have some of those gifts. And so again, as opposed to downplaying those, I probably should have taken more of an opportunity to embrace those so I could build upon those. But instead, a lot of times I spent time trying to fit in. And that whole trying to fit in created a lot of problems, because what happens a lot when you try to fit in, or at least what happened to me, was I put myself in environments or around people that just didn't fit or couldn't understand. Because a lot of times when you have a certain gift and you're not aware of it, that lack of self-awareness will impact other people, and you have no idea why some of these things are happening, why people are saying things. People would say things to me like, well, other people come from different circumstances, but we've never had a conversation about circumstances or different circumstances and things like that. But it's people really reacting to what they see and what they perceive me as thinking about them, when that's not even something that's in my purview. That's not even, as they say, one of the roaches in my ashtray. So again, I just think that, don't downplay your natural gifts. People tell you things that are good about you. They tell you the gifts that you have, or you identify them. Hold on to those, embrace those. Don't play them down in the spirit of humility. I think there was a poem that said, a man's greatest fear isn't that he's inadequate, but that he's powerful beyond measure. And it goes on to talk about that there's no nobility in playing yourself down. Well, folks, I learned that too late. And that's one of the things that if I had the opportunity to go back and change it, I would absolutely change that. And then the last one is just not giving myself credit. I tend to believe, again, in the spirit of humility, that I'm just an average man with an average life trying to make it happen, and that everything I'm doing is what I would expect that everybody else is doing. And so if I did something special, it wasn't about doing something special. It was about, as they say, doing my job, or I met the assignment, or I followed the assignment. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. And so when people would tell me, hey, Sabado, you did a good job on this. Hey, Sabado, your approach to this was spot on. Hey, Sabado, you really inspired change. Instead of saying, hey, thank you, and really feeling good about that, I got myself pushed into the idea that I had to do more. I had to do more, because it's not enough just to be okay. And I've gotten to a point in my life where I think I'm doing a little better than okay, but I still get into the point where I'm pushing, and I just never stop. And sometimes I find myself getting frustrated with others because others may not be doing some of the things that I think they should do in order to get to that place. So again, that comes back to the place where we talk about those expectations and not everybody being in the same place or having the same sets of opportunities, or just ultimately just being different people. And again, I want to make sure that I'm clear. I don't expect everybody to do the same thing. And, I'm not saying people are bad because of X, Y, or Z. All I'm saying is if what I'm doing is meeting what I believe to be the basic requirement, then I feel like I have a whole lot more work to do. But again, I say it, and I hate to say it this way, I'm a 53-year-old retired black dude. There's not, most of us at 53, I don't care if you're black, white, or whatever, aren't retired at 53. So, and I recognize that now, but I think I put maybe a little bit too much pressure on myself to succeed. And it wasn't necessarily a fear of failure, but in some regards, I think it was a fear of failure. I never wanted to be in that place where I gave the universe the opportunity to, I don't know what the word is, but to laugh at me and say, you coulda, shoulda, woulda. And so I always tried to fit in. I always tried to be what I thought I was supposed to be, and in some cases, discounting who I was. Now, don't get me wrong. I've always been an authentic person. I've always been who I am. And if there's any of you out there that know me personally, I'm just a different cat. I've always been a different cat. But it hasn't been until recently that I've embraced being a different cat, because being a different cat is what's helped me get to where I am today and get to what I consider to be a coveted position of finding this financial independence. But again, I have to give myself credit for that, because if not, I go to the grave feeling like I didn't do enough, I didn't do anything well, and I feel bad about not accomplishing what I needed to accomplish. But the fact is, I did. And as Frank Sinatra said, I did it my way. So those are the 4 things that, as I was on my walk today, I thought about. A lot of us look at older generations, and if you're like me, I think about older generations and who's giving me the advice. And I'm saying, between the time that I was a kid and now, which was the 70s and 80s, and now, the world is totally different. So how much of that stuff still relates? Because they didn't have social media, they didn't have shit. They barely had, they still had rotary phones when I was a kid. So the times are different. And so the more that I think we can relate on just the time that we're in, the things that we're dealing with, the fact that it seems more relevant, then it becomes useful information for each of us. And so the big piece of advice here is be your authentic self. It's almost like a YouTube channel. You could get on a YouTube channel and try to be what you think the world wants you to be, and you'll get mediocre results. But if you get on and you're authentic, then you have the opportunity for those billions of people on YouTube that are looking for somebody just like you to find you. And guess what? They'll love you for you. It may not happen overnight. You may not be Mr. Beast or somebody like that, but there's only one Mr. Beast. And the funny part about it is even he's being authentic, because he's doing what he's passionate about, and he's got millions and millions of followers. And so it's the same thing in life. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but the friends that I have, the company that I keep, the community of people that are around me, they love me for who I am and what I bring to the table, good or bad. And everybody has a superpower, but all vices is an overextension of a virtue. And so, anything can be construed as bad. So, don't try to fit in. Don't try to be what you think you're supposed to be. Be who you are. Be the best that you could be, but appreciate and allow yourself to be successful in your own right. Do the things that fill your cup. And when people tell you good things about yourself, they always talk about when you meet somebody and they say, if you meet somebody and they show you who they are, believe them. Well, when people tell you good stuff about yourself, believe yourself. Take your own advice for yourself. Because I think you're okay. You're part of my community. We're all friends. And If you ever have a question about anything, feel free to leave it in the comments. I answer all the comments, and I always tell people that if you ask me a question and I care enough about you to answer the question, it's always going to be the truth. You're a part of my community. I'm always going to give you the truth, and that's where I think we'll stop. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and keep it real, keep it right, and I will talk to you soon.